We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
Oil prices up, the dollar unstable, global GDP contracting. It's all about the money on this episode of Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and with me for this Wallet Watch segment is Chris Calandra from Elliott Wealth Management. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me today. I always enjoy spending some time with you on this segment.
It's always great having you.
Yeah.
And we'll start with the oil prices. We are facing some problems on that front. OPEC Plus has just announced they're going to be cutting production, and President Biden depleted the U.S. strategic oil reserve last year in an effort to lower gas and oil prices prior to the 2022 election. So where does that leave us now?
It's a good question. Of course, I am not a geopolitical expert, but it's clear that the strategic petroleum being to the lowest levels, I think, since like the 1980s or something like that, let's just say a very, very long time, that does leave the country vulnerable. So it's a weakened position. I don't agree with what the president did last year to unleash that oil on the market just for political engineering and election engineering, but that is what happened. Now, the trick is he has to, or the government does have to fill that back up. Supposedly, they're going to do it at a good price. I think he targeted somewhere around $72, and it was there for a little bit, but with the OPEC announcing a surprising cut in production, prices have spiked up a bit. So they're going to need to fill that back up. We'll have to wait and see. It probably isn't going to be anytime soon. I don't like it, though.
Probably not. And with oil prices spiking now because of the OPEC Plus announcement, we're also going to see oil and gas prices, particularly gasoline prices, go up because they go up seasonally as the summer driving season hits. So with those higher gas prices, what's that going to do to a family's grocery bill and the inflation that they're seeing every day?
As you said, it's seasonal. You expect gas prices to go up in the spring into the summer. I will say, though, differing maybe on your opinion, is gas prices are still not likely to be as high as they were last year. I think I'm looking at a chart here as we're speaking. Last June, was over $4 a gallon on average in the US, I believe, and now we're a little below $3. So it will be more expensive than maybe it was over the winter, but I don't think demonstrably so. I would say if you want to talk about price increases that are negatively impacting American households, I think food prices are a much bigger issue than gasoline prices. One of the political commentators that I like to follow has said that basically the presidential election will be Joe Biden versus the grocery store. And his opinion was that that's the key thing, the price of food. So I don't think the gas prices going up a bit over the summer will really be that impactful. They'll still be quite a bit less than last summer, it looks like.
Which is good because food prices showed no sign of slowing their inflation.
None. Yeah, inflation has come down, as we've talked about in this segment. It was 9% in June last year. It was at 8+% in September. The numbers haven't come out for March just yet, but February was 6%. So it's been trending downward pretty reliably. I think that'll continue. Although the big inflation number. The main headline number has come down consistently. Food prices have bucked that trend and continue to go up. And that's a big problem for a lot of American households, especially those at the lower economic rungs in this country, the most vulnerable. It's a big, big problem.
It is, especially since that's the part of inflation that affects them most directly and what they see most often.
Correct. Yeah, that's
So,
fair. They're not looking at, oh, look, and we're stereotyping, of course, but they're not looking at, oh, look, computer prices have come down. And look, a $1.2 million home in the Hamptons is now down by 12%. That's not really the world they live in. And so much of a percentage of their income goes to food compared to wealthier individuals. It is continuing to create financial stress in a lot of households.
it is. And it's funny that you mentioned the price of computers coming down because a survey just came out from IDC that sales of computers have plummeted.
Yes.
And we're seeing some real changes in consumer behavior, partially because people are getting back to what they consider normal after the pandemic, but also because they're looking at where they can spend the money, and food and shelter are basically taking up the bulk of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I will add, and this is an opinion, I haven't looked at any data that indicates this, but a lot of people spend a lot of money on technology with the work at home trend and everything that occurred in the pandemic. So I think that cycle has maybe run its course, and people are not ready to necessarily reload to go out and buy more technology, improve their technology, because they probably splurged a bit over the last couple of years. I have a sense that that's part of the equation too.
Yeah, no, they've got what they needed. They don't feel the need to upgrade. And
Right.
we're also seeing that in the tech layoffs, because
Yes,
that
very much.
entire sector ramped up during the pandemic to try to meet the need of remote work and everybody being at home. And now, as things are getting back to, some semblance of normal, the tech companies are going, wow, we really overhired. We don't have a need for all these people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when most people think of inflation or deflation, the idea that technology has delivered a lot of deflationary pressures over quite a number of years now, where most Americans live and think, that doesn't really impact them as much as some other things like food and energy and shelter costs. So there is a disconnect with how the government tracks the inflation number, the CPI, which is well documented. It's a flawed number. I think everybody agrees. It's just, what is the alternative? But I think you bring up a good point about a lot of mainstream Americans, especially at the lower rungs. Certain things going down in price doesn't help them at all, doesn't do much, if anything, at least in terms of perception, if not in reality.
Exactly. Now, we've also seen reports that several countries are looking to decouple their currency from the US dollar. For decades, the US dollar has been the global standard in currency. What exactly does that mean, both potentially for investors and for Main Street, if it affects Main Street at all?
Yes. I know there are some what I would call doom and gloomers out there that will talk about the imminent fall of the dollar, led probably by China's economic as well as military emergence. I think these doom and gloomers, though, largely overstate the risk in the short and midterm. It is a very real problem long term. The reality that America has the standard around the world that goods, especially oil, is traded in US dollars, gives the United States economy significant advantages, including its ability to borrow money to fund deficits. And we all know we have massive deficits. But here's where I think the case can be very much overstated. And this is going to be in a little bit of the weeds. I'll try and keep it short and simple. Is the US dollar floats. The valuation of the dollar is just a market-based valuation. And the government does do things to try and manipulate it to get it to go its way, but it floats. The yuan, which is the Chinese currency, is supposed to, by most accounts, be the leading factor in unseating the dollar as the worldwide currency. The trouble is, China doesn't allow the yuan to float. They have it pegged. They control it. They are a communist, centralized economic system, and they do not let their yuan float. You cannot have a worldwide currency that supplants the dollar when you don't have a floating currency. I have another point to make, but Eric, did I explain that okay, at least so far?
Yes, you did.
Now, additionally, the China yuan is pegged to the US dollar. So recently, the Chinese came up with an agreement with Brazil where they're going to change their currencies, and it's not going to happen in the dollar. And some people are worried about that. And it is a bit worrying. But the reality is, it's still a derivative of a US dollar trade because the yuan is pegged to the dollar, meaning the value of the yuan is directly related to what the US dollar is doing. You cannot supplant the dollar while you don't float the currency and while you have it pegged to the thing you're trying to supplant. So, in summary, I think if you watch some of the doom and gloomers, you might get these emails or pop-ups or subscribe to these different newsletters that will have you believe perhaps that the world is falling when it comes to that. I'm not worried. It does not affect Main Street today. It is a longer-term issue. But I don't believe it's one in a short and midterm. And this news that came out about China and Brazil is very, very mild in terms of the things I think we should be worried about in the short term.
Right. So, I mean, as much as people are talking about it, and as you said, the doom and gloomers, the average man on the street is not going to see an effect from this. It's not going to, cause them any trouble. So I think that's what's really important to remember.
Yes,
So
I agree.
Just to wrap up, there's also been some talk. The IMF is downgrading global growth. They think growth is going to slow. We've talked about, you think that if there's a recession, it'll be a mild one. Does this change that in any way?
It does not change that in any way, but it does highlight the reality that Europe, most Western countries are having a more difficult time with inflation and economic growth than the US. We have, and I know you talk about it on your show, the US has some significant problems across a wide spectrum, societally, educationally, economically, our political body, the list goes on and on. However, the issues facing many other countries, notable countries, including in Europe, they have problems that are far worse and more intractable than the US issues. That might be a little shocking, but inflation in a lot of countries in Europe is worse, and they don't have the dynamic economy the US does. So I think what that points to, in my opinion, is that the US will probably slog it out, maybe avoid a recession, maybe have a slight one, but other countries, especially the European Union, are in for a tougher time. Worse inflation, worse economic growth, and probably a recession that's a little nastier.
And that's the raw naked truth. Thanks for being here, Chris. You can catch every episode of The Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.